Hey everybody, sorry I can't be there with you tonight. I have a doctor's appointment that I desperately need to go to. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a reinforcement on macro story, so that you have a little bit more of a better footing, just as a practical example of maybe how to lay out a macro story. So I think macro story is a really interesting part of development of the story world, coming up with not only the interesting past of the story, of the story world, but then also the future of the story world and how it's going to develop over time. So if you watch the macro story lecture, you know that this is what makes that story world dynamic and really interesting. But outside of the theory and sort of the broad concept, I'd want to take a couple minutes to really lay out just a really super practical example of how this will look in exercise in a very high level. So I will share my screen and walk you guys through the construction of a macro story. So let me get to this. All right. So let's say in this hypothetical world, our soapbox is don't give up on kids because kids are our future. Okay, give up on kids because kids are our future. Let's do a world that needs a soapbox is a world where we are giving up on kids. So within that paradigm, let's come up with a high concept of let's do zombies, right? Zombie kids. So high concept is zombie kids. So it's a zombie virus that only affects people who are under 18. Okay, for whatever reason, completely random high concept. So that sounds sort of fun. We're going to do this in Los Angeles, right? So Los Angeles, California. And we'll see how it goes from there. So presume that I've gone through the mapping process and the character group process and all the mythopia, et cetera, and then I get to macro story. So when we start with the macro story, usually again we can start with a flat timeline, and you have that flat timeline. And then the first thing you do, this is typically what a timeline looks like, right? Just that flat timeline. So the first thing you can do is just split this into thirds, right? Because we want to make sure that our timeline arcs like a story. So we need a good 3-act structure, just like Aristotle says. You need a beginning, middle, and end. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, right? So we have Act 1, we have Act 2, and we have Act 3. So remember that Act 2 is all about the high concept. That's where the high concept lives, in Act 2, okay? So we have Act 1, we have Act 2, we have Act 3. So if this is the timeline, just outlining the rough outline of everything, I think that this would be LA with zombie kids, right? Then we have, before zombie kids, I call them Z kids. And then Act 3 is going to be the resolution. And let's say that we find a cure, right? We cure the Z kids. Okay. So ultimately, I know generally this is going to be the big blocks of my timeline. That this part of the timeline that is going to be right here is going to be all about LA dealing with zombie kids, right? And then this part of the timeline is before the zombie kids are a thing, and this is all going to be about resolving the high concept and curing the zombie kids. Now, how do I know I want to cure the zombie kids? Why can't we just kill all the zombie kids? Well, the reason we don't want to kill all the zombie kids is, remember our soapbox, right? Don't give up on the kids because the kids are our future. So that will inform us into the resolution. So once you have sort of the big block of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 down, Then you want to draw this thing. You don't have to, but I personally like to draw what's called Freytag's pyramid. Okay, Freytag's pyramid is this sort of funky looking contraption here. Now, this is the exact same thing as this. It's just that the second act is split in a way that that shows the rise and fall of action, right? But you can actually cut this just like this, right? And so this part is your act two, this part is your act one, this part is your act three. So we still have that 3-act structure, but this shows this, what I call the shape of story, a little bit better. But your timeline is going to be very similar. We know act two is going to be dealing with zombie kids in LA. Act one is going to be before zombie kids. Act three is going to be resolving the conflict of the zombie kids and curing the zombie kids as per the soapbox. So so once you have Freytag's pyramid, right, then, and you know your big blocks, then you just want to go ahead and start putting down your fence post beats, right? Fence posts, like when you're building a fence, you put a post every so often, right? So these are specific beats that most stories have to force an arc of the story. So not every story has all of them. Some have more, some have less, but usually 7 is about right. And so so we're going to look at these one by one as we go through. So the first one is our monkey wrench. Now, you may hear other people refer to this as the inciting incident or the catalyst or the disturbance. I like to call it a monkey wrench because this is the thing that screws everything up, right? So this is the thing that causes the high concept. So what is a historical event in my world that could cause this high concept? So I know that this part of my timeline before the monkey wrench is going to be normal Los Angeles, right? Normal LA. But the monkey wrench, let's say that, what causes the zombie virus to happen. And so let's say there is, let's see, I was going to say a bad vaccine, but that's going to be probably too politically charged in this day and age. So we'll move away from vaccines. And let's just say maybe there is, what about a dangerous cocktail of, let's say, bad Tide Pods plus bad EDM music equals zombie virus, right? So patient zero. It's a ridiculous premise, but let's just go with it. So so the monkey wrench is the first kid who gets the zombie virus, and it's a bad bunch of Tide Pods. It's bad EDM music, and that creates a cocktail in his brain that makes him go crazy, and he say, eats his dog and attacks his family and runs off. Okay, so all of a sudden, patient zero being created is going to be the monkey wrench, or maybe it's the kid this happens at school and he starts attacking everybody at school and then kind of runs off. It can be anything. There's no wrong answers as long as it meets the purpose of the beat, which is to cause the high concept to happen. Okay, so then we have enter the bizarro world. So we're going to even say enter the high concept. So the bizarro world is LA dealing with zombies, right? So this part of the timeline is always going to be chaos. Okay, this is where nobody knows what they're doing. Everything's crazy. Nobody knows how to deal with this crazy high concept. So what's a historical event that we could have at this point in the timeline that reflects that? So let's say LA breaks down Um, it's you know, pandemonium. Um, you know, every man for himself, um, etc. Like, but it's because the Z kids virus spreads. Okay, so you can, like, you know, here is where, like, you know, you hear the sirens going past and the planes are crashing and you know, cars are crashing and people are running every which way in the streets and et cetera, et cetera. If you remember that part of The Last of Us, that of the pilot of The Last of Us, when everything starts getting crazy, this would be that beat of your macro story, right? Um, so then let's kind of pin that in. Then we go to grande success. Okay. Grande success is a part of the timeline where we first start to understand how to deal with the high concept. We haven't completely solved it or fixed it, or we don't completely understand it yet, but we've started to make strides in understanding it. That's going to be grande success. Now, I actually like to skip over grande success and go to all in first, because all in is pretty easy. All in is where we completely embrace the high concept, and we know we're never going back to the old world, and we've completely embraced it. Now, what makes this easy is the all in beat this part of the timeline. So all in is your midpoint. So if you go back up to the flat timeline, you know, your all in beat is right here in the middle. Okay, so the midpoint of the timeline is the world that you've been building this entire term. So it's exactly where you are. It's the world that you've been building this entire term. This is the high point of the high concept. Okay, so you kind of already know what's going on at that point, right? In your world, and you can describe that however you want. But that's going to be the pure reflection of your high concept. So grande success is going to be somewhere in between all in and inner bizarre world, where inner bizarre world is complete chaos. We don't know how to deal with it at all. All in is where you're dealing with it in the world that you've been building so far. Grande success is somewhere in between that. Okay, so let's just say in this, my all in is Z kids. The Z kids are normal. Okay, we've sort of maybe quasi integrated into society somehow. We've figured out how to, you know, keep them from eating us and killing us. We've maybe, you know, you put a football helmet on them and some gloves on them, and you can keep them in the backyard. Or maybe we figured out how to suppress the desire in some way to make them quasi-functional again. And that may be interesting, right? So Z kids integrated back into society. Maybe there's a special school that might be kind of cool. A special school they have to attend, sort of a Z kids academy, sort of a deal, almost like Monster High, where their zombie virus is suppressed just enough to make them not feral, and they just have to kind of deal with sort of their cravings, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say that's our all in. Grande success is somewhere between chaos and integration into society. So let's say grande success is where we figure out how to suppress the virus and stop the spread. Okay, suppress the virus and stop the spread. So there's no new zombies being created because we can inoculate against it, and we've learned how to suppress it just enough to where, you know, the kids can go back and, you know, they may not be able to live at home, but they can live in this sort of special boarding school, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be sort of the Z Kids Academy that we see in the All In. Okay, then we get to venti failure. Okay, so if you guys know Starbucks, so if we have Grande over here, right? Venti is bigger than Grande, right? So as big as a win this is in Grande success, Venti failure needs to be even a bigger failure. It needs to be a tragedy in your world, right? So let's say all of a sudden the virus mutates. Okay, virus mutates, and now we have I don't know, bad idea, but let's go like super zombie kids, super Z kids. They run fast, they can jump high. They're more dangerous. They're sort of like they swarm like bugs, like in World War Z. They're not like the Walking Dead zombies. They're just like, completely crazy town, go everywhere sort of zombies, right? And they just really just overtake all of LA. So that's going to be our Venti failure. So then we get Soapbox Revisited. Soapbox Revisited. So this is the part where everything sucks. This is the low point of your story world. This is where everything really just needs it seems hopeless. It's the dark night of the soul. So let's say at this point, the government has quarantined LA. Maybe they're gonna bomb LA, and they tell everybody who's over 18 to evacuate because in 12 hours, they're gonna nuke the place. Okay, but what do? Are we abandoning the kids? Of course not. We're not going to abandon the kids. We're going to cure the kids. Why? Because of the soapbox. We can't give up on the kids. So maybe there's a group, maybe a character group, maybe the humane group or the transcendent group within the story world. They decide, you know what? We are not going to abandon our kids. Everybody else is evacuating and abandoning the kids. We're not going to. So they stay inside LA, and they have to figure out how to find a cure or save their kids before everything gets nuked, right? So then we get the main event showdown. Again, sorry for my bad handwriting. Main event showdown is all about, we're saving the Z kids, right? We figure out how to we figure out the cure. We figure out how to administer the cure, save the kids, cure the kids before those bombs are dropped on LA, right? Or maybe the bombs are dropped on LA, but these particular parents are able to save, a certain amount of their kids or whatever after they inoculate them, right? Maybe not all the kids are saved, just some of them. I'm not sure. You can go a few different ways with them. So again, we sort of go like normal world. We go the thing that caused the high concept, which is the monkey wrench. So normal world, the thing that causes the high concept of the monkey wrench. We go to the inner bizarre world, which is very chaotic. Grande success is all about starting to figure out how to deal with the high concept and getting a win as we go. The all-in is the world that you've been building at the high point of your high concept, starting what the Greeks call in media res, which means start in the middle. That's why we build from the middle, because we want to build the high point of the high concept, because that's the commercial idea. Then we go to a tragedy in your world, which is that Venti failure. Then we go to the low point of the world, which is Soapbox Revisited. And then we have a big epic showdown, which is the main event showdown, where we resolve the high concept. We can either resolve it or not resolve it, right? So you don't always have to resolve it. Like at the end of the Matrix, they didn't resolve the high concept. But if you don't resolve the high concept, you got to kick off. You can kick off a new macro story from there, if you'd like. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the end of the IP. Just this is like the end of the Infinity Stone saga, potentially, depending on how you position it. So this is super high level. But if I were sketching out a macro story, I would do a high level sketch like this, and then I would go and take each one of these little one sentence descriptions and I would turn it into a paragraph or two, really kind of going in depth about what's going on in the world. Again, not about necessarily specific characters, but if you're designing the history, like a Wikipedia article of the history of the world, like how would you write it, right? And so, but this gives you a good outline to work off. So, so anyway, hopefully that, I was going to go with you with you tonight, but obviously I'm not going to be able to do that. So I wanted to be able to do this to be able to give you a little bit of an example of how this can work. So so hopefully it's helpful to kind of see it in action. And I'm going to look forward to checking this out on Confluence. Your individual ideas on Confluence. Again, sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I got sick over the weekend and got a doctor's appointment, and so I'm not going to be able to hang. But looking forward to seeing what you guys put together. Hopefully that was helpful. We'll talk to you soon.